This is Jessica Taylor interviewing Cary Franklin on July 12th, 2013 in Gloucester Courthouse, Virginia. Mrs. Franklin, can you please state your full name?
It's Cary Lawson Franklin.
Okay, and what is your date of birth?
I hate to tell you, 7/23/23.
Okay.
My 90th birthday's coming up.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. Where were you born?
In Gloucester. Actually, about across the street from where we are today.
Okay. What were your parents' names and occupations?
They were Hazel Lawson and George Lawson. And he was the Ford dealer here. Prior to being the Ford dealer, he owned the Botetourt Hotel, the old hotel that's near the museum.
Mm-hmm. And what about your mother?
She was a homemaker.
Okay, what was her name?
Hazel.
Hazel, okay. Did you have any siblings?
I have a brother.
You do?
And that was George L. He died about 2 months ago.
I'm very sorry. And as for you, I know you have had many lives, but what was your occupations?
Well, I started out teaching school and then went to work for tech as an extension and home economist.
Okay. And what is your earliest memory of Main Street?
Well, as a small child, and I think you saw some pictures there where we used to play, and the maid, when we lived at the Botetourt building, the maid would bring my brother and me over to the central part of the village to play in what we call the court green.
Okay. And when you moved around Main Street, where did you go most often besides your own home?
Well, back there then it was so different because you knew all the storekeepers and you knew everybody you passed on the street. And of course, for me, I just lived on one of the side streets, but I'd visit at the hotel at the time. Then the Botetourt building was a hotel that my aunts owned and great aunts owned, and I'd visit there, and that's where you sort of central communication.
Okay. What were the stores that your parents frequented most often?
Well, the main grocery store was was Martin's store, and then Ellis Carr's store, and then the drugstore. Naturally, the two drugstores. One was Morgan's drugstore, and the other was Gray's Pharmacy. And then later on, we had the A&P come in and those stores.
Okay. Did you go to Morgan's or Gray's or both?
Both.
Both.
Didn't show any partiality.
Oh, I understand. Okay. Tell me a little bit about growing up near the Botetourt Hotel.
Well, the nice thing about that would be that the people that would come there, you'd meet because everybody was so friendly, and they'd be from all different parts of the state. And there's one thing that I think that was the Botetourt Hotel at that time, I guess you would say, catered to the traveling man. And that term traveling man, when the Historical Society did a lunch or something, and we showed the slides that had been taken, and we mentioned the thing traveling man, then, and maybe you don't even know what that term denotes. Well, each of the large corporations would send out a man to the communities to go to each of the stores and take their orders for any of the products that they sold. And so once a month, or maybe once every 6 weeks, they had this little bit, the group usually came to Matthews and Gloucester. don't know whether they went across the river or not, but they went to all the old country stores. And so they were called the traveling man, and I guess that's what it was. But we had used that term before, and no one understood what it was.
Huh.
So
What years did your family run the Botetourt Hotel?
that goes back to when I was about 4 years old. So what would that be? That'd be back in, I
1927?
said, about 27 or 28, because my brother was born on 27. So it must have been in 28 and 29.
Okay. Were you often inside when visitors and guests were there?
Oh, yeah.
What was that atmosphere like?
Like home, all of them enjoyed it. And of course, they said that the food that was there was the best food that they ever did. And of course, my aunts had in the back of the hotel, they had raised pigs, and they had their own, that was their own garden and fruit trees and chickens and things. And so naturally, the people who were away from home were glad to get the good food.
Mm-hmm. Who made the food? Do you know?
Two or three different cooks, and they had the one man in particular was the waiter, but he also took care of any of the other things that went on in the hotel, around the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of, there a lot of people like to say butler, but he probably acted more like that.
Mm-hmm. Would locals often come in and intermingle with the visitors?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Did most people arrive in cars?
All of them did.
All of them did, even in 1927?
Yeah.
Okay.
Most of the transportation at that time was the old cars, and we had I was thinking, I think it was back when I was probably in high school, that they had the bus service to Richmond. I don't know whether anyone else has mentioned that or not, but it came from the Bristol family in West Point owned this bus. And it would take you to Richmond, and then in the afternoon pick you up and bring you back home. And I'm not aware of anything that they did like that to go to the Norfolk area. I don't think that it did. And of course, I listened to my aunts tell it. They'd catching the steamer and going, to Baltimore and all up in there.
Mm.
And then, of course, when the roads were passable, I guess I could say.
How was life different for you than it was for your aunt's generation?
Well, I don't know. They seem, I guess, being that I went away to college would be one thing, and that where they had more of a home atmosphere, I was allowed to go and do more of the things that they didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's about it.
Okay. Was courting different for you?
Well, yeah, I think so. They were very careful about who you dated. Your mother and dad had to know who you were dating, and you had to come home, and you usually had to know where you were going.
Mm.
So whether they checked, I don't know. But anyway, that was part of it, was making sure they knew where you were and you came in at a reasonable hour.
Mm-hmm. What was that like for you?
Well, it just was perfectly normal, and we had at that time we had the skating rink, and of course, all of us in early, as soon as you learned to skate, you just were. That was part of your life, going there on Friday and Saturday nights.
Mm-hmm. So you would go on a date to the skating rink?
Yeah, or to the movies.
Mm-hmm.
That was about it.
If you don't mind me asking, did you date men from your high school?
Yes.
Anyone outside of high school?
Well, yes, when you the different ones that you would meet at other places, the fellows would, if they could drive, would come down and come for a special something or go skating and all like that.
Mm-hmm. Where are they coming from?
Well, the ones that I'm thinking about were mostly from Richmond area. That would be about it, yes.
And they'd come down to Gloucester?
Oh, yeah. And then too, you had the people that owned summer cottages here, and their sons would come down, and that'd be that you get to know them then, and they would bring people down, and that's all.
Does that promote lasting relationships, or does that promote?
Well, yeah, I would think so. That picture you saw of them dancing, several of those were married and stayed there, and others went away to work, and would come home after retire to come back home for retirement years, I guess.
So it's a way to meet people.
Right.
Kind of spread your wings a little bit.
Right.
Was it a shock attending JMU?
Of course, it was being away from home that length of time was difficult. And of course, transportation was really, I couldn't just up and leave and come home. I had to make arrangements to take the bus, and sometimes go to Stanton and take the train to Williamsburg. And then somebody would have to meet me. So that was difficult. It was just easier staying there until then.
Mm-hmm.
And then to visit, that was a 4-hour drive by then to come to Harrisonburg to visit. So the parents didn't come as often as they would have if it had been closer.
Mm-hmm. That must have been isolating.
And then too, at that time, and in particular, the school then did not have chemistry. It was one of the subjects that they didn't have. And so in my first year in college, I had to take the chemistry. And of course, that was a shock to my nervous system. It was just, I had to spend a lot of time studying to catch up with the girls that went from schools that had a little bit better education.
Mm. Well, how would you describe your high school experience in Gloucester, academically and non-academically?
I thoroughly enjoyed high school, and I hear people talking about it now and what they don't like about school and all. And I think taking everything in consideration, because we're talking about the end of the Depression.
Yeah.
And, when you stop the teachers that came here were making like $80 a month, and they had to pay their board and everything else with that. So we're just talking about an entirely different situation when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, as far as parties, and we didn't have a senior prom. We didn't have any of those things attached to the school system. You had your own private parties and all. And so it's different.
Where would private parties occur?
They would be in your home, and there's a place still up there, a log cabin that was built, I guess, by WPA, and you could rent that to have a dance, a party, or whatever.
Wow. That's really interesting. Did Gloucester as a whole or your high school have any traditions, things that would happen on Main Street or?
Well, I would say not really. We had remembered one thing, and I can't really remember what it was for, but we had the the one big parade that year, and we were all dressed in colonial costumes, and I just can't think of anything really, that we celebrated other than that. And of course, we had the ball games at school, but they were mostly basketball. It wasn't large enough. The boys wanted to have a football team, but there weren't that many. And no coach, of course.
Right.
That makes a difference.
Hugh Dishinger, do you know him?
Yes.
He was saying that his father's generation had a party on the court square where they would go around to different people's houses on Christmas and drink. Do you remember anything like that?
Oh yeah, everybody had that. Sometime they didn't all. It wasn't all on Christmas Day, but a lot of them. But that's what you did on Christmas morning. You got up and you went from one house to the other, and I'm sure probably in the late afternoon and night there might have been plenty of drinking in that too. Some of the homes I remember going to that were just, this was every year you look forward to going to their home for Christmas. And then they in turn would come to yours.
Because I can experience this. Can you give me a sense of what made a home so great that you would really look forward to going there every year? What did they do that was so special?
I'm not sure just how to answer that because I don't know, it just all seems so different today from what it was back then. But my family had the doors open to anybody that would, whenever my friends were welcome to come in, and they would sponsor a party or any of those sort of things. It made it just something, you were just real close with your family and with the community. I'm sure that in where I live down on the avenue, and Hugh lives on the opposite side, that the neighbors made sure they knew when we were coming and going to. They were careful about seeing that we behaved ourselves. And I think a lot of that now, so many people don't even know who their next door neighbor is, where all of us knew one house to the next and felt free to go at any time and visit with these people, with their neighbors.
Mm-hmm. So holidays are a communal event.
Well, I would think mostly maybe holidays, but most of the time I felt like when I came home from college, the different neighbors would want me to come by and let them know how things were in the Harrisonburg area and why I liked going to college and what I was going to do. Interested in what, I think the community was interested in what all of us did in the schools we went to and, the things that we did.
Did you always know that you were going to come back here to Gloucester after college?
No, I don't think so. I probably thought, I realized if I had stayed in the program that I went into, I was studying to be a dietitian. And my graduation was in the home economics and with the minor in science. And of course, at the time I got married right after I graduated from college, and I wasn't sure, but I had a feeling I'd live in Richmond because my husband was from Richmond.
Oh, you were married already.
But I was married right after college, after I graduated. And he was from Richmond, but we decided we were in Portland, Maine, and we weren't going to stay there. And so we came home and decided that we'd wait until after the first of the year to settle either in Richmond or Gloucester. And he was given a job at the weapons station, and so we stayed here. Mm-hmm. And we're glad we did. He is too, or he was.
How did World War II affect the community here? You were in college probably at this point.
Right. And, well, the different, I guess they were the USO clubs, and all of the communities will have the boys over for dances, and girls we'd get on a school bus like thing and go to across the river to a dance. And then one time we went somewhere in Matthews. And then when I was away, the girls would go into the dances in Williamsburg, but whatever club was sponsoring the dance would go to the different communities to pick up the girls to go dance. And it was fun meeting all of the people. I think the community got involved more then than they have recently. That they were glad for the boys to come and have a day off or a night off and entertain them. You'd meet somebody and then have them over to a meal or anything that would make them glad that they were in the service.
I'm imagining that would change the social environment considerably.
Mm-hmm.
And because you have all these people that you've never met before.
That's true.
An influx of men.
That's right.
Did that change dating for other women, or?
Well, a lot of the women, I was thinking about way back talking about the skating rink. Some of the boys that were in the service, men that were in the service, would come to the skating rink and married, and then later these girls that they met at the skating rink or at these dances, particularly if the man was stationed close by. And that they would be married, and there are quite a few that did marry, and their children now were in school with my children.
Wow.
So some of the names you can think back at least a half a dozen or more that the families, are here from because of the war.
That is so interesting. Do you remember the gas station from the 30s and 40s?
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever stop there?
Oh, we all did, and we'd stop in to get. My father was in the Ford business, so we didn't have to stop and get gas and all as much. But I knew the boys, the brown boys, that they on the outside they had that little hot dog stand down there, and Mr. Brown was always good to the boys and girls that would come there. And I guess that was a meeting. Like I say, my family wouldn't need it because my father had that business, but I'm sure it was a stopping place for quite a few people in the community.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever go inside it?
Oh, yeah. I don't remember that much about it, though.
Uh-huh.
Because I was thinking when I saw that it was being remodeled, and so I was sort of thinking all I remember was the main opening building business, with the front door going in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess then I was thinking, I reckon I remember where the automobiles would get repaired right next door to it. And it's about all I would.
So you can't really think of anything in the interior that stuck out to you?
No.
Do you remember there being a ladies' lounge on the side?
No.
Okay. What was Captain Jack like?
Well, just a very nice person. The whole family were, and he was a good businessman and ran that business for a long time, and he hired responsible people. I knew people that had worked there 15, 20 years, maybe longer than that. And that was a gathering place, really, when people would come in from the Ware Neck area. I'm sure they always stopped there. for gas and probably to find out if everything's all right too.
So it would be people from Ware Neck that would gather there?
Well, I'm sure that they did, yes. I can't, other than coming in, stopping to get gas or pick up the newspaper or something like that, just to check, see if everything's all right, yes.
I know this is so specific, but do you remember anything about the hot dog stand in particular? Who ran it? What it looked like?
I knew that the Brown boys ran it, which would be Captain Jack's nephews, and I'm sure he helped them through school too, because their parents, the father had died, not the mother, and I'm sure that he did help them through college and all. And it was a nice place for us to go because they had very few places we could go other than your own home. And the movies you see lasted a week, so after you saw it, that was one night, and that was the end of that.
So the hot dog stand was an acceptable place for kids to go.
Right, and it was always nicely run.
Huh. Do you remember any of the people that worked there? Did you know them personally?
No, I knew that both the Fred Brown that worked there, but I can't. I don't know. I must not have gone there for a while.
You don't remember the one-armed man, do you?
Yeah.
Howard Brown?
Yeah. I was trying to think. I hadn't thought about him. He's a nice guy. Nice guy. But I don't know anything in particular.
Yeah.
Except that he was very friendly and we all knew who he was and all that. So.
Well, if you could think of any anecdotes for me about Main Street or the gas station in particular, does anything stand out to you?
Well, it was there when I was born, as far as I'm concerned, and it's still there. I mean, in most communities anymore, everything is brand new. Not that old, and it's sort of a place that you always had good thoughts about. Nice people went there, nice people ran it, and when we knew it was going to be sold, we weren't real pleased. Because it had always been there. And we're pleased that it's in the situation it is now, and hope that will continue.
You mean the sale where Andy James sold it to George Larimore? What was that period like?
I just didn't get involved with that, so I'm just not real sure.
Okay.
But we were glad that it was sold and glad that it's presentable now for the county, because it had been before. And when you shut a building up, it makes it bad for the community. And now that it's opened and, pleasant looking and everything.
I understand that. So when did your father start as Gloucester's Ford dealer?
That would probably be, let's say 1930. I was trying to think my brother would say. That was probably, I'd say 1930, or in the early 30s. And then he ran it until he retired while I was in college. So that would be in the 40s. I was in college in 44.
Where was it located?
It is now where I was trying to think. There's an art studio in the back of the building. What's the name of that? I always ask my daughter about that the other day.
Is it Arts on Main?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was the building, and of course it sold gas, so the gas pumps out there. I had remembered my daddy always, he and I were always close, and when I'd come home from school, if the World Series and all going on, I'd always stop by and listen with him to the ball games. And of course, he just was in that building. They, at one time, and that must have been in the 30s, that the dealers, several of the men were into the dealing business. Ford and Buick and all that. But when Daddy took over, his was just the Ford Motor Company. And then later on, he opened up the Ford Tractor Company over and above the automobile. And like I said, he retired when I was graduating from college.
What was business like for him?
It was really great. And the people in the lower part of the county all bought their Ford automobiles and Ford pickup trucks from him. And I think that when my husband worked at the weapons station, and he got to know a lot of the people in the lower part of the county, and they would tell him or invite him they would invite him to go fishing with them, or and they would always talk about my dad being such a good person to them. And I think one of the tales that Daddy tells that was nothing for this one particular man to pull up in his pickup truck and then open the box where he carried the fish and the oysters and the clams, and it would be full of cash money to pay for the next call, which struck. And I remember the term $900. That was what one of the pickups cost at that time. But they had the cash money to pay for it right then.
So the people that bought from your father, were they just watermen, or was it a wider range of people?
That was a large percent of the people, and then the local village people and all of that, they would buy their cars. Mm-hmm. Of course, that was the next door neighbor was down there was the Plymouth and Dodge building, so they were all friendly and got along well, which was good.
Mm-hmm. This may be too broad a question, but what brought people to your father versus other dealers? Was it the brand? Was it your father as a person?
Well, I guess it's a little bit of both. Most people would buy a Ford automobile or would want to relate to Ford automobile. And I think Daddy got his reputation that he gave somebody a good deal, and then they would take care of the Ford automobiles back in the back where his shop was.
There's nothing particular about it being a Ford.
I would think, a lot of people, that was the only car they wanted, was a Ford automobile. Just like there's some people only wanted a Chevrolet, but it just. And there were some people that bought a new car every year or every 2 years, and they come back.
What kind of person would buy a car every 2 years? Or every year?
Probably a doctor. The doctor and the druggist and other storekeepers,
Okay.
And those that had good jobs across the river that could afford cars. Way back then, not every member of the family had a car,
Well, that, brings me to the question, when did your family first get their first car?
But see, with him being in the car business, we always had a car.
Even in the 20s?
Yeah, well, I think we had a car from the minute he went into business.
Wow.
Can't exactly remember about that, but I'm sure to get to that was, yeah.
Okay. Do you remember going places in it?
Oh, yeah. Mother would always take us for rides all over the county and different places and go visit the grandparents and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't remember being without a car. I might be old, but I really, the aunts always had a nice car. And when we go to Richmond shopping and all. So I would think almost immediate. I remember mostly having a car.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so.